Well, good morning and welcome to this week's pairing, where naturally we need to pair the Bridgerton 1 with the Bridgerton 2 palettes. But before we get into that, of course, I'm going to be doing the rest of my face makeup. As usual, I use the same products that I always do, so if you're curious about that, just shoot me a comment below and I will get back at you. I very briefly wanted to touch upon the Bridgerton 2 collection again, because obviously aside from my own video, I've watched a bunch of other videos from, well, not a bunch, I've only watched 2 other videos. I watched the video from Martina and I watched the video from Charlotte, and both of these ladies also bought the blush palette. And I have to say, it's such a bummer that the blush palette has such terrible packaging, because both of them really raved about the actual product on the inside. I would have really considered purchasing the blush palette had the packaging turned out to be more luxurious feeling than it did just by looking at the photos. FYI, I have switched to using my little sponge again, because yeah, I've been really enjoying the finish that it gives me. I feel like it gives me like this very blurred soft focus finish, and I've really been enjoying using it again for my, you know, concealer, foundation, that kind of thing. I'll probably switch back to a brush at some point. I might at some point even compare like half of my face with a brush, half of my face with a sponge, to see whether I see such a huge difference or it's all in my head. But yeah, it's such a bummer, because I love me a good, you know, glowy blush formula, and I love Pat's Original blushes, do not get me wrong, I love those. But you know, neither of them is really like that satin glowy finish, and these new baked blushes seem to be exactly that kind of finish. So I'm really bummed out. I will say though, if that blush palette ever goes on sale, like major sale, we're talking 50% off, and she doesn't release these baked blushes in, you know, normal human packaging, I might consider purchasing it, because I would really like to try the formula. And I'm also very tempted to buy the shade Negligee from the lipstick line, because I am kind of in love with the formula now. I wore Elson 5 to work yesterday, and I thought that because of that, you know, more lightweight, thinner formula that it has, it's probably not going to hold up as well. And for a red lipstick, you know, you really do want it to hold up really well. But like I said, I don't mind reapplying lipsticks. But I was very surprised how well this lipstick lasted, despite of being such a lightweight formula that you don't expect, you know, longevity from. So I was pleasantly surprised, and I would actually really like to pick up one of the more nudie colors. But the only thing I am doubting about is whether I would like to try Negligee, or what's the other one? Something with peach, Venusian peach, I want to say, because personally I prefer more peach toned nudes. I'm grabbing my Milk Makeup Bronzer in the shade Baked. However, that Venusian peach shade just looks to be a little bit too light and a little bit too nude, whereas the shade Negligee, even though it's a boring like pink nude, looks to have a very flattering undertone to it. And of course, with lipsticks, especially with more neutrally nude type of lipsticks, you can almost never tell how it's going to look on you, because the way it looks on a certain person is not the way it's going to look on you, because all of us have different like pigmentation to our lips, and lighting, especially like studio lighting, can make a huge difference in how especially lipstick looks in real life. Even when I film my videos and there is very strong sunlight coming from outside, I can tell you that my lipsticks always look brighter and more warm toned than they actually do sometimes in real life. So this might be one of those occasions where I pick up the lipstick with high expectations of getting something new, and then finding out that it's just same old, same old. But with that said, I am very tempted to buy it. For blush today, I'm taking my Set Depotted Lisa Eldridge blush in the shade Dante's Dream. As you guys know, the packaging of mine broke, and I think I already mentioned it in on an Instagram post, but just in case you don't follow me on Instagram or you missed it, the customer service of Lisa saw my post and they apologized and they refunded me the amount of the blush. So if your packaging broke and you never reached out to customer service to let them know because you thought too much time had passed and they won't refund you or they won't help you in any sort of way, then please go ahead and message them, because they definitely will. And now switching to a different topic that was actually requested by one of you. Someone commented in one of my videos that you find it very, you know, admirable that I can speak so many different languages, and you asked about my experience in like learning and speaking so many different languages. So I thought I might tell you the story of what kind of languages I have learned through my life. Have I found it easy? Have I struggled? And all that kind of thing. I'm taking Lunar Nude as my highlighter, and I want to preface this by saying that I find it very sweet when people, you know, compliment me for speaking so many different languages, but I'm the kind of person that is always very harsh on themselves. So when it comes to speaking many different languages, I always beat myself up for being a jack of all trades but master of none. So I feel like I speak a lot of languages at a very high level, but not at a literally level, and for whatever reason my baseline seems to be literally level. So I never really think of it as such a big deal. But you know, in case you were curious, taking my little sponge to spray with Fix Plus. So I kind of started my life sort of bilingual, because for those of you who don't know, I am ethnically Armenian, but I was born and raised in Bulgaria for the first 23 years of my life. And I used to only speak Armenian because my parents only spoke Armenian to me when I was growing up until the age of like 2 or so, and then I went to daycare, and obviously they couldn't speak Armenian. There was a huge like language barrier going on, and I quickly switched to Bulgarian, and for whatever reason my parents maybe also thought that it would be easier if we only speak Bulgarian at home. So I only started learning Armenian again when I was in school. Let's move into the eyeshadow look, shall we? So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to go into the first Bridgerton palette, and I want to take this shade in my outer corner and lightly blend it out through my crease. And I'm thinking, actually, you know what? Hold that thought. I'm going to apply a little bit of statuesque to my crease first, because I want something to ground the look into like a bit more neutral territory first. And then I'm going to take the plum from the first Bridgerton palette. And just to quickly finish off the story with the Armenian language, I am terrible at it. I almost don't speak it. I know I can say like a few sentences and fake it, but honestly I cannot really speak it. The major reason for that being that when I went to school as an extracurricular activity, I studied Armenian, but unfortunately our teacher was this elderly woman who would like get sick quite often and be missing for like longer stretches of time, and every time she returned we would kind of restart the same textbook, so we kind of never really made a lot of progress. And like I said, my parents for whatever reason stopped speaking it at home. So I would say, as far as Armenian is concerned, unless I make an effort to learn it again, it's sort of a lost language to me. And then my parents were, you know, visionary people, and they knew that English is going to be a big deal. So as soon as I started school, they took me to an English teacher, and the English teacher sent them home, because when I started school at the age of 7, we start school at the age of 7 in Bulgaria, and the first thing we do, of course, in the first year is learn the alphabet. So they went to the English teacher and she was like, no, I'm not going to take her this year, I will take her next year. She needs to first learn the Cyrillic alphabet and only then learn the Latin/English alphabet. So I started learning English when I was 8. And honestly, I just really enjoyed it. Learning languages has never really been very difficult for me, and I've always really enjoyed it. And I'm not saying that to toot my own horn, but I just think our brains really are differently wired. And while my brain is very much in tune with learning new languages, it is completely out of tune when it comes to mathematical, you know, thinking and reasoning. Mathematics was never my strong suit. I think to this day it's not my strong suit, and that has partially to do with like trauma from bad teachers. But I think just my brain is more, you know, wired towards learning languages than it is towards, you know, the mathematical sciences. Just wanted to put that out there, because I have friends who really struggle with learning languages, but they're so good, like their brains really are wired to think in a mathematical way. And if you can think both, then you're a fucking genius. So I'm just going to fluff that plummy shade into my outer corners. So like I said, I started learning English when I was 8, and then when time came for me to go to high school around the age of 13, I ended up going to a language school, like a high school which was centered around languages, and the two languages that were primary for me were English and Russian. So I studied also Russian for quite a few years. Let me tell you, Russian is such an unbelievably difficult language. For someone who doesn't even struggle that much with learning languages, I was not bad at it, but it's a difficult language. Unfortunately, past high school, I haven't really practiced it or done anything with it. And the thing with languages is not like riding a bike. It's not just there and comes out when you call for the information to come to the surface. You really need to dig much deeper into the archives if you are to relearn a language that you used to speak but no longer can. And I think maybe if I would dig back into the archives, it would be easier for me than someone who starts from zero. But that being said, if you ask me to have a conversation with someone in Russian right now, I'd be like, Здравствуйте, меня зовут Mariam, and that would be it. By the way, I'm now going to grab a little bit of my glitter glue. And not only did I enjoy the actual learning of the grammar, but I also really enjoyed the literature part of it, because English language was my profile in high school. So we also had to read a lot of books, and I took that task very diligently. I would go to the library and I would borrow abridged versions of classics. And I just really enjoyed myself, you guys. When I went to take my university admission tests, I applied both for English and for biology. And I went to the English exam, and during the oral exam, I told the dude who was interviewing that I have no interest in pursuing a career as a linguist at all. I was just there for shits and giggles, and I got in. Even so. But I chose for biology after all. I'm going back into this palette, by the way, and taking this gorgeous shade, the shade Duchess Divinity, and I'm going to apply it here onto the outer part of the lid, a little bit over top of that plum. I love this shade so much. And yeah, I took all sorts of tests because I wanted to study abroad. So I've done TOEFL, I've done SAT tests, like they do in the US. And then I ended up moving to a not non-English speaking country, but to a country where English isn't the primary language, aka the Netherlands. And I moved here 16 years ago to do a master's study. And I had absolutely no intentions of staying here long term. So for the first year or so, learning Dutch was not even remotely on my priority list, because I wasn't planning on staying here, and everyone in this country speaks English. It's amazing. You stop people on the street and you're like, I'm so sorry, I don't speak Dutch, can you help me in English? And they're like, oh no, my English is terrible. And then you end up having a conversation with them and you think, and that has been the case for most people. Ironically, the only person when I moved here who didn't speak a word of English was the landlord in the house where I lived in, which was very unfortunate because there were a lot of things we had to communicate. But he was a very sweet guy, and he seemed to really like me, so he always made the effort to, make sure that we understand each other. Okay, just stopping the rambling for a second to tell you what we're going to now take from the second Bridgerton palette, and that is going to be this gorgeous mint shade. I wore this shade yesterday again in my inner corner, and I am just so in love with this shade, okay? I love it. I think I'm just going to actually use my finger to apply it. And then towards the end of my first year, the beginning of my second year here, I already knew that there's a very high chance I'm going to stay here to do my PhD. And I thought, you know what, it might actually be fun for me to learn Dutch, because it will help me to integrate better. People approach you differently when you have made an effort to learn the local language, okay? We can kid ourselves any way we want that people here are very open and blah blah blah, but I think they do appreciate you making the effort to learn their language, especially if you're going to stay here long term. So I started learning the language when I was in my second year of masters. Do I want to put this in my inner corner as well? I'm taking a somewhat smaller brush now, by the way, because I find it difficult to shove the mint shade into my inner corner just using my fingers. And then I started learning the basics. I had done like 2 or 3 courses, and my PhD became much too demanding and time consuming, and I kind of stopped going to the courses. And then for the longest time I was kind of stalling and I wasn't really making any progress. And the biggest thing, you know, when you learn a language is you need to break the barrier of actually starting to speak it. And obviously I learned Dutch at a much older age than I did English. I learned it much less systematically and much less long compared to English. But I had the privilege of being immersed in the language because obviously I live here and I'm surrounded by people who speak the language on a daily basis. You know what, I think before we finish off the look on my lids, I'm going to go back into the Bridgerton 1 palette and take the plum shade and run it across my lower lash line. But before I do that, I'm going to apply a tiny bit of Pat McGrath Intensifies on my lower lash line to prevent smudging. So then, some years after that, I found myself with more time on my hands and I really wanted to, you know, better myself at the language. Especially I wanted to increase my vocabulary and I really wanted to be able to finally start talking. So I took this course, like this literature club course, where we read books. And I enjoyed it so much that I subscribed to the library after that, and I read a bunch of, like, especially their 20th century classic authors. And it was such a fantastic experience because, first of all, it showed me much more of the beauty of the Dutch language, because people, and rightfully so, say that it's not the prettiest language in the world to listen to. But seeing it written down and, you know, in a much more literary way than just, you know, the spoken language I was confronted with in my daily life, I learned to appreciate it more. And I think it also helped me to understand the culture a lot better. So after that, I started my new job, where people hadn't really met me at the time when I only spoke English, because that's the thing here. It kind of is an automatism. When you've met someone and you spoke a certain language with them, it's very hard to switch to a different language, which is also the reason why, even though I can speak Dutch, I don't really speak Dutch to my husband. We'll get back to that in a little bit. Now, for the very fun bit of layering, I'm going to go back into the Bridgerton 1 palette and take the Astral. And I am going to layer that basically here over top of the mint green shade, like this. Trying not to overdo it though, because I want to apply another Astral afterwards. Because we can never have enough Astrals in our life. And obviously the green and the blue sparkles make an absolutely fabulous combination. But now, to make it even more fun, I'm going to go into the second Bridgerton palette and take this Astral. I wore this Astral yesterday, by the way, over top of the browns from the Bronze Seduction palette, and I loved how it looked over the browns. And I'm going to repeat this, but I'm going to layer this a bit more over the plum shade than I did over the mint shade. A little bit over the mint shade as well, but mostly over the plum. And we're just going to get all of these different bits of twinkle, which is going to make the look so dimensional. I'm going to shine an artificial light on it later. Speaking to my colleagues at my new job in Dutch helped me immensely to improve the my spoken language. And I think it was also, you know, when you start speaking a new language, I think a lot of people are confronted by the fear, especially adult people, that they're going to make mistakes and they're going to embarrass themselves. And I think you need to accept that that is going to happen, and it will make it so much easier for you to actually start talking the language. So then my son was born, and initially I was speaking exclusively Bulgarian to him, but last year we were sent to the speech therapist because he was a little bit behind on learning languages. I'm going to tightline now using a dark brown pencil, and so I was speaking Bulgarian to him exclusively, my husband was speaking Dutch, we spoke English to each other, and then grandma was speaking Serbo-Croatian because my husband originally comes from former Yugoslavia. So then after the speech therapist incident, by the way, the speech therapist said that there was nothing wrong with him, he was just, you know, taking his time to start talking, but he was still on the normal curve of language development. So after that, I kind of decided to cut back a little bit on all the other languages, and at the moment I'm almost exclusively speaking Dutch to him. And I hope that at some point we can go back to speaking Bulgarian. I'm taking a little bit of this plummy Kiko eyeshadow stick to put in my waterline. So that's a little bit my story with all the languages. If you have specific questions, please let me know. But basically the 3 languages that I can speak really well, so I can read, I can write, I can have comfortably a conversation in, would be Bulgarian, English and Dutch. Oh, and I have learned also Spanish. When I was in university, I had like a month free between semesters, and I've always really wanted to learn Spanish, so I took a level in Spanish, like only the first level, and unfortunately I don't remember much of it, but honestly, if I ever have more time on my hands, I would love to learn Spanish because I really love the language. Okay, let's see what we can do about demoing that sparkle. I think it looks really pretty. I really like all the different twinkles that are coming through. Keeping in line with the mauve purple tones, I also went with a similarly colored lipstick, and I have, which would be the shade Hideaway from Urban Decay, topped with the tiniest bit, well actually not the tiniest bit, I applied quite a generous amount of the shade Naked Rose, which is one of Pat's Lust glosses, so this has a little bit of sparkle to it. I really like how these two pair together, and I really love how this look turned out. Like this plummy purple mauve together with the mint green is just chef's kiss. Let me know what languages do you speak and what was your experience learning those when you were growing up, or did you have to learn them when you were a little bit older? I'm very curious to learn about your experiences. Thank you so much for watching. I'm gonna head off to work and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!